National Home Ownership Program. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Good.
I hope your listeners are engaged with us this morning.
These listeners are always, if they're one thing, they're engaged.
Well, some of them are married.
Some of them might be married. So, Barbara, what is your message today? What do we need to know about? There are so many foreclosures out there.
Sure. So I'm here this morning just to make consumers or homeowners aware that loan modification scammers are out there and they want to take their money. And in some cases, they're taking the money and the homes, but they definitely want their money. And so we want to avoid that as much as possible. And we want homeowners to know that there are legitimate sources out there where they can get assistance.
Where can they get the help?
First, they need to contact their lender if they believe that they are going to be struggling in the near future, or if they're currently struggling with their mortgage and they're trying to determine if they should get a modification. Work with your lender. Now, every time I say that, I know that people want to just shake my hands because they don't really want to work with the lender. But the lender is really the only entity that can make that approval or the guarantee. So I would say start first with the lender. Secondly, they should work with a HUD-approved housing counseling agency. And those agencies, or the counselors at those agencies, would be able to assist the homeowners in navigating through these waters, getting through the process, and determining whether or not the homeowner is even eligible for local programs as well.
What are the biggest pitfalls? What should consumers be looking for here? How can they sniff out one of the bad guys?
Sure. So we've been doing this for about 5 years. The campaign started in 2009, and we've been saying the same thing, and hopefully people are listening this morning because we know that people are still falling victim to these scams. But never, never, never pay any money up front. So any company that is asking you to pay money up front, a lot of times they'll even be willing to work with the homeowner and establish a payment plan. But any money at all is against the law. The Federal Trade Commission banned that practice in 2011, and so we don't want homeowners paying any money. Secondly, if they're telling the homeowner to stop paying the mortgage payment and to send the money directly to the third party, stating that they'll make the payment on the homeowner's behalf, that's definitely a no-no. Third, if they're saying to sign some paperwork that the homeowner is not quite certain of, we want homeowners to keep their homes, but we want them to not pay money that they don't need to be paying.
Hey, our advice here on this show is always to stay local. If you stay local, it's usually pretty safe.
Yeah, but you know, in the case, so I'm glad you bring that up. There are local housing counseling agencies, but in a lot of cases, the lawyers, they're also in this space, and I apologize if you have any listeners that are lawyers, but we have some bad actors.
Yeah, it's my show. I'm a lawyer.
Have involved lawyers, and so a lot of times homeowners are paying retainer fees, and the lawyers aren't even licensed to practice law in the state in which the home is located in.
Well, that's crazy. Where is all this information available, Barbara?
Sure, they can. Homeowners can visit www.loanscamalert.org for information on reliable resources as well as where to report a scam. In addition, they can call the hotline, and that number is 1-888-995-HOPE. That's 1-888-995-4673.
Barbara, thanks for the information today. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Have a great day.
Barbara Floyd Jones, Senior Manager, National Home Ownership Program. You're not a bad actor, are you, Bill?
Well, not only are there some lawyers listening to the show, there's a lawyer on the floor.
Yeah, right. They are listening.
Yeah, that's
Closer than you thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's just you and me this morning,
Yeah.
Greg.
So what are we doing?
Well, let me just tack on to what Barbara just said in terms of mortgage foreclosure, because there was a change in the mortgage foreclosure law this last year.
Who knew?
Well, only lawyers. There was a 90-day grace period that you had under Michigan law with every lender. In other words, if you were in default and you got a notice of default, the lender had to give you a notice that if you made a request for a meeting between you, the lender's representative, and a housing counselor, and a list of approved housing counselors, that the lender had to delay the foreclosure for 90 days, and that sunsetted, that's gone, that no longer exists as of the beginning of this year, with respect to all banks except for 5 banks that were participants in an agreement with the federal government. So if the bank is Ally / GMAC, GMAC was taken over, changed to Ally, Bank of America, Citi Mortgage, JP Morgan Chase, or Wells Fargo. Those are the only lenders that are now subject to the 90-day grace period. All other lenders are not subject to it. It's absolutely correct that the worst thing you can do is, if you're struggling with your mortgage, the worst thing you can do is stop making payments and ignore the correspondence from the lender. The best thing you can do is immediately get in touch with the lender, start a dialogue with the lender, tell them that you're having difficulty. Even before the foreclosure starts, you may be able to work out what's called a forbearance agreement, in which the lender agrees to forbear enforcing the mortgage to its full extent, pending some workout plan. Usually they might allow you interest only. It just depends upon who holds that mortgage. Some lenders are easier to work with. When you said, shop local or stay local, I agree 100% with that. Dealing with a local lender who is still holding the mortgage. Now understand that even a local lender may have sold that mortgage to somebody else. But if the mortgage was what we call shelved by the lender, local lender, it's going to be a lot easier to do a workout with that lender than if it's a large national bank that really isn't as easy to deal with. But that's it with respect to foreclosures. The worst thing you can do is ignore it. But we're seeing there's a huge decline. That's an oxymoron. There's been a very, very large decline, or dramatic decline, in foreclosures in Michigan. I mean, it's sort of like that snake that swallowed a football. It's now worked its way pretty much through the snake, and now we're back to a lower level of foreclosures. It's not the same problem that we had before.
And if you want to start a dialogue and your lender is in India or Pakistan, that's tough.
No. You'll still be. You'll get
Really?
to a representative. Yeah, you'll get to a representative.
Even on the internet?
I don't know the answer to that one. I want a telephone dialogue. I don't want a web dialogue. I want a telephone dialogue with somebody at the lender. Unfortunately, it's going to be in their special service. If you are now in default, it's gone into what's called special services, and you're dealing with somebody there. And as I say, some lenders are easier to deal with than others. I won't name. And I understand too that most of the foreclosures that I've dealt with and deal with are commercial as opposed to residential. I only get involved in a very large residential mortgage on occasion. And so my experiences with certain lenders, I can tell you from that experience which are the ones you can deal with, which ones you can't. Sometimes it's actually easier for me if it's been turned over by special services to a lawyer for foreclosure. For example, if it's with Trot and Trot, I have a great relationship with Trot and Trot and the other foreclosure firms. My experience with those lawyers is I can deal with them, I can talk with them. I may not always get what I want, but at least I've got somebody that I can communicate with, which is a little easier sometimes than getting somebody in special services. And, when Barbara says, if a lawyer's charging you money simply because he or she says, I can do this workout for you, that's not the case. I mean, lawyers, we practice law, lawyers who do real estate law understand that you've got to work through the system, and you have to be able as a borrower to do a workout. If you just don't have the money and you're trying to do some sort of plan, a modification, Barbara's exactly right. Work with an authorized or qualified housing counselor, work with a lender. You're better off spending your money toward doing that workout than spending it toward the lawyer. And this is a lawyer saying this. So I agree with that.
Very good.
All right?
Yeah.
Actually, what I was going to talk about
Yep.
was a new statute that's been adopted with respect to uncapping of taxes. We all know that under Proposal A, which was adopted in '94, took effect in '95, that property taxes are capped in the state of Michigan. They can't have an increase greater than the lesser of the rate of inflation, or 5%. That's the capping of taxes. And so what we worry about then is, upon a transfer of the property, the uncapping of those taxes. And if I'm doing family transfers, son, daughter, parent, grandfather, however I may be doing this, the exemptions were very, very narrow. And last year we had an amendment to the statute, and I actually pulled it up this morning. Let me see if I can find it here.
What would uncap that 5?
A sale. In other words, a
That uncaps it?
transfer of the property, unless you fit within a recognized exemption, uncaps the taxes, so that now in the year following the sale, the taxes are uncapped and will now reflect the true cash value, or 50% of the true cash value, which is the taxable value. And that's what I'll get taxed on. And let's suppose you've got property that's been held for the last 20 years. Those taxes may be artificially capped at an unbelievably low rate, and therefore uncapping results in a very, very large tax rate. So that's what we're concerned about. But what we had was last year, beginning December 31, 2013, was an amendment to the uncapping exemptions that said the property would not be uncapped if there was a transfer of residential real property, if the transferee is related to the transferor by blood or affinity to the first degree, and the use of the residential real property does not change following the transfer. And when somebody talks about
What's affinity in the first
there
degree?
you go. Okay, well, it's like what what's the
You're
thing
just
with,
friends?
what's the thing with Kevin Bacon? I'm within 6 degrees. I'm within 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. It's what's known as a degree of what
Is he
lawyers
still
actually
around,
call-
Kevin Bacon?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, probably doing Tremors 4 or something like that.
I-
At any rate, lawyers talk about the degree of consanguinity or within bloodlines, so that my son is within the first degree of affinity or first degree of consanguinity. My brother is within the second degree of consanguinity, because you have to go from me up to my parent and then down to my brother. My nephew is within the third degree of consanguinity. Go to the parent, down to my brother, down to my brother's son, if that's my nephew. And so this was this was a great exemption. I mean, this meant that, for example, the cottage which I own in Tawas City, if I want to transfer it to one of my kids, then that transfer would be exempt. I could transfer it, well, my parents are dead, so I couldn't transfer it to my parents. Strangely enough, the Michigan Tax Tribunal held that a grandparent was within the first degree of affinity, which is absolutely wrong. Held that the brother or sister was within the first degree of affinity, and that's absolutely wrong, but that's what the Tax Tribunal held. But that exemption was changed once more just this year, taking effect on January 1, 2015. So the provision I just recited expires December 30, 2014. The new one that starts, and when I said January 1, I'm actually looking at the statute right now, begins December 31, 2014. Beginning December 31, 2014, a transfer of residential real property. Doesn't have to be my home, just residential real property. Could be rental residential property. A transfer of residential real property, if the transferee is the transferor's or the transferor's spouse's mother, father, brother, sister, son, daughter, adopted daughter, grandson, or granddaughter.
Or
So now-
bowling partner?
Yeah, probably. Okay. And the residential real property is not used for any commercial purpose following the conveyance. I mean, this is a very, very broad exemption that now allows for all of these intra-family transfers that before would have resulted in uncapping of taxes, prevented us from making these kinds of intra-family transfers because we were so concerned about the uncapping of taxes. Now we have this exemption. And then what's interesting about this change in the statute, a lot of people, some people hold their properties, whether it's their own personal residence or other properties, in trusts, what we call grantor trusts, in which they have complete control. They're revocable grantor trusts. This statute contains a number of sections which allow for transfers into and out of controlled family trusts or grantor trusts. So it really is a very, very broad, welcome exemption from uncapping of real property.
Who's the Who's the loser? Is it the state?
Local government.
The local?
Yeah, local government, because uncapping of taxes, those taxes are the revenues relied upon by local government to pay for the expenses of the municipality. Yeah. Yeah. So those are the losers right there. But that was on my list, and talk about uncapping of taxes. What else you want to talk about?
I like that.
Okay? Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
all for that.
Yeah, well, you gotta remember,
Keep
proposal.
those capped.
Well, this is going to be strange to hear a citizen say, but I actually have sympathy for municipalities who are struggling to find revenues. At least those municipalities who are fiscally responsible, who use their funds or spend their funds wisely, who build up reserves. Use a portion of it to build reserves instead of spending everything that they can possibly get their hands on. But municipalities are really struggling as a result of the recession. So you have to have some sympathy for city managers and mayors and city councils. And I'm not just saying that because my wife is on city council.
Where is she, by the way?
She's teaching a seminar over in Flint
Oh,
today
okay.
on buyer agency.
Yeah.
And, yeah, 2-day seminar. She
Not,
left.
not that it was any of my business. But
No, yeah, I always wonder where she is myself. I just happen to know out of the blue.
So how's business?
What, her business or my business?
Business.
As a lawyer, look. No, as a lawyer, it's great. Look, I'm a
Okay.
litigator. I'm a trial lawyer.
Right.
It's always good. People are always fighting. I'm delighted with that. As long as there are arguments and disputes, disagreements and fights, I'm a happy camper.
Court's always busy.
Yeah, some courts busier than others. I do stuff not just in Jackson. Actually, most of my stuff is around the state a lot in southeast Michigan, Wayne County, Oakland, Washtenaw, some in Genesee, etc. Your phone's quacking.
Yeah. It's been quacking all morning.
And as far as real estate, I think Laura's been very busy. I know, Jackie,
Yeah.
things are popping.
That's good.
And I represent, in addition to doing litigation, I represent a lot of developers and owners of commercial properties, and that stuff is going gangbusters right now, particularly over in the northwest suburbs of Detroit. We've got a number of transactions going, both good and office and a couple of retail. So, yeah, no, things are happening.
So business is
Yeah, really.
coming back?
Yeah, it's been coming back. Yeah, for at least the last, I'd say, 18 months or so, things have been happening. And I was telling one of the seminars I teach earlier this month that I've actually started seeing some what are called conduit loans coming back. The lending market is loosening up, both commercially and residential, particularly in residential. It's becoming easier to qualify for a mortgage than it was before. It's not like it was before, which is a good thing. We don't want loosening of the credit limitations to the extent we had before, where people were qualifying for mortgages and buying homes that they really couldn't afford. That's not happening. I don't think, is it, Jackie? I'm not seeing any of that yet. But at least there's some loosening of the credit standards. And in commercial transactions, it's still difficult. Before the meltdown, we were getting lots of what are called non-recourse loans, where the lender did not require personal guarantees, where it was strictly the land and the buildings that were the security for the loan. There wasn't personal liability. That's still difficult. As I mentioned, I've done a few conduit loans in which they're non-recourse liability, no personal liability, but those are still far and few between.
Need a lot of guarantees.
The problem is you can't get a lot of guarantees. Let's suppose that you and I and 5 other people form an LLC. We want to go out and we want to invest in an office building. Before the meltdown, none of us would have had to personally guarantee the loan. We each put in, $100,000 or whatever the number is. We go out, we borrow the money, we buy the property. None of us had to personally guarantee it. Now, one of us, let's suppose you are the entrepreneur, you're the person who's setting all this up. You get the investment proceeds from 4 other people, and you now get this property. You're not guaranteeing it, they're not guaranteeing it. The problem we have right now is because of the lack of non-recourse funding, you're going to have to get guarantees. Well, you're not going to guarantee the whole thing because you only hold 1/5 of it. I'm not going to guarantee it because I only hold 1/5. So, we're not going to be able to get all 5 of us to guarantee it, because all of a sudden now that shows up on our respective balance sheets as liabilities, contingent liabilities. So we're just not going to be able to do that kind of investment that we were doing before. So we're seeing investment on the part of well-heeled economically individuals who are able to put together a package and personally guarantee it, or are willing to personally guarantee it, or we're looking around for, could be SBA funding. Again, these are relatively small deals, up to maybe $5 million. But it's still difficult, but not necessarily impossible. We're seeing some more of it.
Thinking Real Estate hotline is
517
517
780
780
3800.
3800. Thanks, Bill.
Okay, my pleasure entirely.
Vista